Hey guys, welcome back. If you've been here before, thanks for coming back. If you haven't been here before, I'm Jason with Long Bottom Farm. We're a small family farm in Scottsville, Virginia that raises cattle, pork, and chickens for eggs and meat. And today, if you've ever wanted to raise chickens for meat, well, hopefully this video is going to take you from start to finish on how to do that. We're talking about pastured poultry today. This is the second video in a two-part series. First part covering brooder management. Second part, we just brought the chicks out. Today, you can see behind me here, these are their chicken tractors, and we're going to go through the process of putting them on pasture to getting them ready for the processor. So come along and let's learn about raising pastured poultry. So why raise chickens on pasture like this? Well, one of the main reasons is the bird's health. These animals are out in the sunlight, they're eating natural forage, in addition to some non-GMO feed that we provide them, so it's just healthier for the bird. The meat quality is much better. If you've ever tasted pastured poultry, you won't want to go back. I compare it to getting a fresh tomato out of your garden that you've grown versus a tomato you'd buy in the store. There's just a stark difference. And that's because how the birds are raised, their diet, sunlight, and all the natural things that a chicken should have. Lastly, the environmental benefits of this are awesome. These chicken tractors behind me here get moved every day. The chickens are providing manure, which is perfect fertilizer for the pastures. It's just a nice ecosystem where we provide supplemental feed to the birds. In addition to the feed that they have, they poop, which allows the forage to grow, that in turn allows to feed cattle or more chickens if we bring them back through here. So it's just a circle that you won't find with commercial poultry. So the chickens typically brood for about 3 weeks, meaning they're in a brooder. If you want to see more on brooding, we've got part 1 to the series. You can see that video here. And this will go over all of the brooding management that you need to know. Today, we're starting from day 1 out of the brooder, which is about 3 weeks of life for the chicken, till they're finished at about 8 weeks. So it's important, after the birds are about 3 weeks old, they've got their feathers, that they move out onto pasture into these chicken tractors. So let's talk about what a chicken tractor is. All right, here you can see our chicken tractors. Basically, a chicken tractor is just a mobile house on a pasture for a chicken.
Tell me something I don't know.
It's mobile in that it has wheels here on the back that allow us to move the entire chicken tractor across the pasture. That allows the chickens to have fresh grass and a new area every day. The benefit to our pastures, obviously, is they have come through here and they fertilized all the way down. That in turn allows the pastures to grow and provides great fertilization for the pasture. So these chicken tractors are kind of an all-in-one deal. They have feeders, they have waterers, and we'll take a look inside here. As you can see, the feeders hanging from the chicken tractor. Got the water in the back, that's the red bell here. And then there's a 5-gallon bucket on the back that you can see here. And so this is a chicken tractor. It provides shelter, food, water, has everything that the chickens need to survive. The only thing we have to do is keep those water and feed full and move the shelter every day to a new area. I want to go ahead and take this moment to give a shout out to John Siskovich. The design of these chicken tractors is from him. John is a farmer up north and also has a ton of YouTube videos on raising chickens, and also has a book, which I've linked to below, as well as his YouTube channel. You can get the book on Amazon, and it takes you through the entire process of building these chicken tractors. Again, I think it's like 10 or 15 bucks. Definitely something I recommend you getting if you're going to build these kind of tractors. What I like about these tractors, there's also the Salatin style tractors, which are the square ones that you move on the ground. They work great as well. They hold a few more birds, but I like these because I can actually stand up in them. I can attach the feed and the water to make them hang so I can move everything at one time. So for me, in my experience, I've used both, and I just find that these are much easier to work with. One of the main things when setting up your chicken tractors or deciding where you're going to put your chicken tractors is make sure they're not in an area that's like a drain field, meaning our property is full of hills, so we have to kind of be careful where we put animals, in that if we have a big rain, it's going to bring a lot of water through in certain areas. And what we want to do is make sure that we're not putting our chicken tractors in watershed areas or in areas where the chickens could be at risk of getting wet or not being able to get out of the wet. Predators are also a concern, so you have to think about where you're putting your chicken tractors from that standpoint. All right, you also want to make sure that along the bottom of the tractors here, that they are sealed, that it's flat. If you get too much area, a raccoon or something could get its hand up under and grab chicks. Also, if there's big enough gaps, chicks could get out and then they're not protected. So just two things to think about. One, just make sure there's no gullies or anywhere that water's going to filter to. And then also just make sure that when you've got your chicken tractor where you want it, that everything's stationary. One little thing we do is, for instance, you can see right here, there's a gap there under the wood there, from the ground to the wood. So what we'll do is on the back of these tractors, always keep a piece of wood here. You can slide that out. And then just put the wood under like that, and that'll fill your gaps. And I typically keep a couple pieces of extra wood on the tractors, and that'll help to fill any gaps and make sure that your birds are contained and that predators stay out. So now that we've talked about the tractors for a bit, the next thing we'll talk about is moving the birds from the brooder to the chicken tractor. We do this at about 3 weeks of age, and that's Cornish cross that we're raising. We load them up into Pasture crates and then transport them over to the chicken tractors and put them in. We typically do, these chicken tractors here will hold up to 30 full-grown Cornish cross chickens. We try to keep it at around 25 just to have better ventilation and room. And this is based on the dimensions used in the stress-free chicken tractor book, which is linked below. Again, you can modify these to make them bigger, smaller. There's so many things you can do with them, but we tend to follow the book that John wrote. And so if you're following that max of 30 birds, we typically recommend around 25. You do need to watch them a little more closely during this transition period. Again, they've been in the brooder the whole time, which is wood chips. So grass, dirt, everything's a little different to them, but they tend to take right to it too. You'll see them immediately start chasing bugs, foraging, looking for different things, just being very curious. And that's one of the rewarding things about raising pastured poultry, is that they're actually out on pasture doing what chickens should do. All right, now let's talk about daily routine and management. The daily routine with these guys typically consists of 1, moving the tractor once per day, 2, feed, and 3, water. That's kind of the main 3 things involved in the management of pastured poultry. Now within that, you also want to be checking on the health of the birds, making sure that everybody looks good and that you don't seem to have any sick birds. If you have any concern that if a bird's getting sick or something just seems off, we recommend that you take that bird and quarantine it. Put it in another area away from the rest of the flock, just so you can observe it and in case it's anything viral or that could spread. Really one of the main issues we see with our birds, and that's Cornish cross, is leg issues. Occasionally their muscle growth will outpace their bone growth, and some of them will start to get so big that they can't support their growth. And what you'll find is a bird that just doesn't move much. It sits there with its legs out. So those birds have to be manually moved every day. We tend to put those birds in a separate area so that we can manually move them every day. But it's one of the unfortunate things with raising Cornish cross. Your alternative to that is obviously the Freedom Rangers, which they tend to roam more. And I haven't seen any leg issues with those birds. But again, they take about 3 to 4 more weeks to grow out. And I can't charge anymore for them. So I'm basically out of 3 or 4 weeks of labor. And we just haven't been able to make it work for our farm. So for that reason, we stick with the Cornish cross. But it's just a downside of raising Cornish cross that you should know about, is leg issues. There's really no cure for it. We do try to make sure that they have food and water, that they're getting all the right nutrients. But again, usually it's just something you have to manage manually, and just part of farming when you're raising Cornish cross. Other things to know with daily management is that when these birds get from about 6 weeks to 8 weeks, we typically start moving them twice a day. That's just because they make a lot of poop. 1, we don't want them in the poop, obviously. 2, it's better fertilizer, meaning we get to fertilize twice as much pasture. So just something to know, that if you're raising these birds in this kind of setup, that once they get about between 6 and 7 weeks, you will want to probably move them 2 times a day, just to make sure that they have continuous clean pasture and to spread that good fertilizer around to help give your pastures a boost. All right, guys, now let's talk about feed and watering. If you watched our video on the essentials of egg management, feeding and watering is not much different. We typically have a watering system, which are Plasson bell waters, and that's these red bells hanging right here. And they are fed by a black tube that's attached to a 5-gallon bucket. So we essentially fill the 5-gallon bucket outside. I'll show you that in just a sec. and that filters down the black tube and into the bell. And it's an automatic watering system, so once it gets full, it will stop filling. And it's a very nice system because there's a lot of poop in here, and what you want to do is avoid getting in here if you don't have to.
You don't say.
So this is a nice way of we can fill it outside with a garden hose, and we don't have to come in here. And it works great. The only thing you have to watch for sometimes is these lines can get clogged up, so you have to keep an eye on that. If you don't see any water coming through, that's an obvious sign that that's probably going on. And it's typically not the lines. There's a filter within the bell water here, and sometimes you just need to take that apart. You just unscrew it from the top here, and there'll be the filter, and you just give that a spray off, and you're good to go. As far as feeders go, we basically use 4-inch PVC pipe, like you see here. And we cut a slit out of the top, and then we use some fence posts that we had and just cut a piece off, and that makes the circle that fits inside. Then just a couple screws on each side. The other thing you can do is you can buy 4-inch caps that go right over this, and they will work perfect as well. Probably a little bit easier to do it that way. Then all you do is put an eye bolt in here, and then attach a chain to it. And then we can move this up or down depending on what the elevation of where our chicken tractor is, or just depending on how high or low we need it. Right now we've got it pretty much lowered all the way down for these little guys. These birds are just over 3 weeks now. They just came out today. So they're finding their way in, but they're nice and comfortable, and they have everything that they need in here. In this one, we have two. I have one here, and then we have a separate one hanging here. At this point, we don't need that many, but once they get about 6 to 8 weeks, they tend to need more feed than what this one trough will provide. So we have a second one. It's hanging by chains, so we can adjust it up or down as needed. And this is one you can see that actually has the 4-inch end caps on. So just a little bit of glue, they go on, eye bolt, and chain. And that's it, and then we just hang them from the structure. As far as other feeding systems, there's the cool feeders like we use here. These work great, but you have to actually get in with the birds and move these every time. So for us, again, it's just not very practical. I love the fact that these chicken tractors, you're able to hang these PVC feeders off. And for the amount of birds that you can fit in there, you can easily get enough PVC linked on the feeders to accommodate that many birds. So it just saves you a step of having to move the feeder along with the chicken tractors. Again, they work great though, and we use them for our layers, but for our meat birds, these PVC feeders, these 4-inch PVC feeders work much better. So from the back side of the tractor is the 5-gallon bucket, and it is essentially on. There's a large 2x4 that's attached to the structure, and the handle of the bucket goes around the 2x4, and that's what holds it on. And then on the bottom, we just have a couple little 2x4s that kind of make like a little pedestal that it stands on. This tubing that we have here is 3/8, so we typically drill a 3/8 hole. And you have to pull this tubing through from the inside with pliers, but that'll make you a nice seal here. And then basically you fill this up from the top with the hose, water drains, and comes out into your plastic bell. There are some alternative watering systems. There's bucket watering systems you can find where you basically just turn it upside down, fill the bell, and then turn it over. And those work great. It's just you have to actually go in to do those. If you're sitting on a hill and they're on the ground, sometimes they can get tippy. So we prefer the hanging waters just for that reason, that it auto levels no matter where we're at. So again, these hanging bell waters do great, and I highly recommend them. They're a little bit more pricey, but the time they'll save you in labor and making all of your moves easier is totally worth it. There's a link down below. We got ours at QC Supply. You can find these though. Look on Craigslist, chicken poultry places that are going out of business, Facebook Marketplace. A lot of times you can find these things, 30 at a time for $10 to $15 a piece. I think brand new, you're looking at probably around 50 or 60 bucks. So just keep your eye out. Like I say, these come up regularly, and that's would be your best bet, would be to get one, not from the big box stores, but online at one of those sources that I mentioned. So those waters and feeders are a very simple setup. And what I like most about them is that now when I move the tractor, which is just with a rope here, the entire feed system, watering system, everything comes with it. So I don't have to really get in and do anything. It's got the wheels in the back, so we just give it a pull one space forward and then fill feed and fill water from the back, and that's it. So the system works very well. It's very efficient. It can be done by one person, and it makes feed and watering very simple. The feed that we use is a non-GMO feed by Sunrise Farm. There's a link below, and it does a great job with the birds. They grow out well on it. Obviously, if you can afford organic, that would be the way to go. We haven't been able to make that work in our system just due to the price, and the price we would have to raise our birds is just not supportable in this area. So we go with the next best option, which is the non-GMO feed. All chickens have to have some supplemental feed. They will not survive or grow out on pasture. They may survive, but they're not going to be very healthy. Chickens are omnivores, so they need a combination of protein, fats, carbohydrates. They're not like ruminants where they can just eat grass and survive, like cattle, sheep. So it's very important that you have, in addition to the pasture, that they have a source of supplemental feed, specifically something made for them. All right, guys, let's talk predator control. The main purpose of these chicken tractors that I'm in is predator protection. This is the shelter that provides these little birds from predators. So it's very important, like we talked about in the beginning, to make sure that, one, that this is secure, that everything's bound up. Again, we use chicken wire, use hardware cloth around the bottom just because it's got much smaller holes. I believe these are the 1/2-inch holes on the hardware cloth. And again, if you use the stress-free chicken tractor book that's linked below, it'll go over all of this, everything that you need for that. And this serves as their home for the next 5 weeks until they're ready for processing. Again, you always want to check around the edges at the bottom just to make sure you don't have any big gaps. Again, you don't want your birds escaping, but you don't want things getting in or being able to grab them as well. So there's additional measures that you can take to help protect your birds. One is you can put an electric fence around your chicken tractor. That will help to keep especially land predators out. Again, it's not going to help with aerial predators much, but again, this has a roof on it, so they're kind of protected from that standpoint. The other thing is if you have livestock guardian dogs, they help as well. They do great and will keep predators away. Lastly, if you don't have fencing or dogs, you can easily get just some fiberglass post, run a strip of high tensile wire around it, and electrify that. Again, that will require you to have an electric charger, which you can find at your local ag store or on Amazon. But that will also provide you with some protection for keeping four-legged animals out. So now we'll talk about getting the birds ready for processing. Once you've taken them, and this is Cornish cross, from 3 weeks of life to 8 weeks of life, at 8 weeks, they're ready to be processed. These birds can be anywhere from 7 to 10 pounds, and we typically shoot for carcass weights or finishing weights once all the non-essentials have been stripped and the whole bird is ready to sell for meat. Usually around 4.5 to 5 pounds is our goal. Again, sometimes we'll get a little smaller, sometimes we'll get larger. But 4.5 to 5 pounds is typically the goal we shoot for a finished bird. And that's packaged, frozen, and ready to be sold. As far as Cornish cross, we typically just use the 8-week mark as the limit. There's nothing really physically that we look for other than if we see our birds that are starting to look abnormally large, that puts them in more danger for leg problems and different things. We may start restricting their feed a little bit. Again, these birds' muscles, organs, everything grow almost like at an accelerated rate, and their bones can't keep up. So if they're getting too big, you can start running into a lot of problems. So the last week or so, it is something that we gauge. Usually we don't have to do too much different, but occasionally we've had to restrict feed for a few birds. Also, you want to think about how you're going to process your birds. And what I mean by that is, are you doing the processing or are you taking them somewhere to be processed? If you're taking them somewhere, not a big deal. We use the Pasture crates. We'll load the birds into the crates, typically either at dark, early morning, or at dark that evening, and then we'll take them at night, and then they're ready to be processed early that morning. What you don't want to do with Cornish cross is take them in the middle of the day when they're at finished weight, meaning they don't tolerate heat very well. And to put them through all that stress and stuff in the middle of the day, and then they're in crates, and then to not feed them for that long, you just don't want to do that. So we either will have our birds crated very early, like while it's still dark, and take them to the processor and then have them processed that morning, or we'll go out about 7 p.m., 6 p.m., just depending on how the weather is, load them up that night, take them to the processor, and then they sit in a cool area to about 4 or 5 in the morning when the processor starts to process them. If you're going to do on-farm processing, then one, you can do the crates. Two, another option is if you're in a position wherever your processing place is, if you can finish your birds, meaning their moves, so that they end up where they're going to be processed. That's something to think about. You really have to start planning ahead for that. But another thing just to think about to make it easier from getting the birds to where they're at to where you're going to process them. Whether you're using a processor, like a USDA processor, state processor, or you're processing birds on your own, it is recommended that about 12 to 16 hours prior to processing that you pull the feed. And that just because it makes the processing a lot cleaner. What you want to do is make it as easy on yourself as possible and to have the cleanest bird as possible. So by pulling their feed, everything else will be a lot cleaner during the processing process. Also, something else to think about when processing your birds is, are you selling direct to market? We can do 1,000 birds here in Virginia under an exemption law, which means it doesn't have to be inspected. And then there's also, we can do up to 20,000 with inspection. So most states have something where you can process a number of birds, but this is for sale at farmers market and direct to customer. So we can't take our birds to a supermarket and sell them there or to a restaurant. Those have to be, at least here, have to be USDA inspected, meaning we have to go through a USDA facility. So it's just something to think about when you're going to process your birds. How are you going to sell them? That will determine whether you want to use a processor or a USDA or state inspected facility, or you can do them on your own. I will say that state and USDA processors are very hard to find for chickens here in the United States.
You can say that again.
It's very labor intensive, it requires a lot of people, and there's just not that many of them. Here in Virginia, we have one USDA inspected processor that's available, and for the whole state. And we're fortunate enough, we're about 2 hours from them, so we use them. And just something you need to pre-plan for, to know if you have an inspector available and you can get dates, or if you're going to do it yourself, what the laws are, and that you get all the equipment to do that. Now moving into some quick safety precautions with these birds. One, you want to make sure they're not in direct sunlight. Like I say, when these birds start to get older, they don't tolerate hot temperatures very well. They don't tolerate super cold temperatures very well. So you need to make sure you're raising them at a time that is appropriate, which for us in Virginia here, it's typically April, May, into around October. Once the months start getting too cold, we don't do it. And that's just because your mortality rate will go up and you'll lose a lot of money in birds that are not being able to be processed, feed that you've already spent money on. So you definitely want to use the warmer months. And again, that'll depend on where you're located and what your climate is. When handling these birds and messing with them, just make sure to wash your hands a lot. This probably doesn't need saying, but just as recently as a year ago, I'm pretty sure it was salmonella that I got. And it was one of the worst experiences of my life. Just take precautions. You think it won't happen, and then all of a sudden you're sick. And so always wash your hands after dealing with these birds, or any livestock for that matter. And just a little bit of common sense goes a long way. If you're thinking about raising birds, there's a couple books that I recommend you get. Actually, the first one's not a book, it's an organization. That's the American Pastured Poultry Producers Association. There's a link down below to them. It's $60 a year to join. And it gives you access, one, to a publication they put out with just a lot of great articles from producers who are doing pastured poultry in large numbers, small numbers, but doing pastured poultry as it should be done in mobile houses. They also give you access to a forum that is just full of information. Pretty much anything you want to know about pastured poultry is in there. It has a nice search feature, and the community is great. They answer questions, and it's just been a source of all things pastured poultry for us. So I definitely recommend it. Another book that we talked about, Stress-Free Chicken Tractor Plans, and that's by John Siskovich. That tells you how to build these chicken tractors behind me here. It's a how-to guide, very short. I think it's 10 or 15 bucks, and definitely worth the investment. And you're also supporting a small farmer in the process. The third book that I recommend is Pastured Poultry Profits by Joel Salatin. Again, this book's probably a little outdated, and I don't know that the numbers make sense completely in today's environment, but it is a great template for how to start a pastured poultry business. It goes over feed management. It talks about his design, which are the Salatin tractors, which work great. And just a book I recommend reading. For a lot of us, it was one of the first books I ever read, and chickens tend to be what I call the gateway drug into farming. Then it goes to sheep, pigs, and up to cows and cattle, and from there. But I feel like everybody I know has started with chickens. So it's a great book. I definitely recommend you read it. And the final book is by Jeff Maddox. It's called Pastured Poultry, Feeding and Management. This is a hard book to find. I got mine through the American Pastured Poultry Producers Association website, and it has everything you'd want to know. Jeff Maddox, he works for Fortrell, is one of the brains behind engineering all of the supplements and the feeds and everything that go into into making rations for meat chickens and is really just a guru in everything feed health related with pastured poultry. So this is almost like a Bible of sorts, in that it's not a book you just want to read, but it's a book that if you're not sure about something, concerned with the animal or something, it's a book to refer to, and it'll likely get you to the answer you need. All of these books are linked below. And I know in the day of YouTube, when you can just watch a video, why read a book? But the books still have a place, and these are some amazing books that will definitely help you on your journey with pastured poultry. As far as talking about the economic aspects of pastured poultry, like anything, if you're doing this for profit, it's going to be up to how you do it, how much time you put into it. Scale also helps. You know, one of the big upfront costs with this is getting the chicken tractors built. Again, you just do some lumber from Lowe's. I want to say at the time we built these, probably about 4 years ago, we probably spent around $300 on each one. Now that's also factoring in some tools that I didn't have that I needed to build, in addition to the lumber and the actual materials that go into it. But they can be built fairly cheap. You can also probably find some of these for sale on Facebook or Craigslist. So look there. At the end of the year, I'm going to do a video on what all of our numbers are, so that you'll know how much we spent, how much we made, and we'll break it all down for you. But in the meantime, just know there is a bit of upfront cost, like I say, to get your feeders, to get your chicken tractors, and then you have ongoing cost. That's, you know, depending on how you're doing your water, your feed cost, of course. If you're going to process it yourself, again, you have to get all that equipment. There's also places, look around, you may be able to rent the equipment. If you're going to a processor, then you need to be prepared for the processing cost of what they're going to charge. But this can be very profitable, provided you manage the birds right and ensure that you have the market to move the birds that you're raising. We also keep a number for ourselves, obviously. It's some of the best tasting chicken you'll ever have. As the pasture, the diet that they get from the pasture, the sunlight, it all just imparts a flavor in the meat and a texture that you just don't find with commercially raised chicken. So, are you guys raising pastured poultry? Have you raised pastured poultry? Thinking about it? If so, leave us a comment below and let us know based on this video if you see something you think we can do better. Also ask questions if you're doing a setup sort of to this, or you're thinking about doing it. We're glad to answer what we can. There's many ways to do this, and this is just how we do it. I would encourage you to watch other YouTube videos and see how they do it, and then you can take bits and pieces from all of them and find something that fits your context. All right, guys, well, thank you again for watching. If you got value out of this, give us a like and subscribe. We'd appreciate it. It helps the channel and helps us to keep putting out these videos. And we'll catch you in the next one. All right, bye.